and welcome to the Merri-Cast, the show that puts you on the fast track to confidence in starting and growing your business. This week, I want you to meet Dani Dufresne, Emmy award-winning executive producer and founder of The Auxiliary. Dani, as you'll hear, looked on in wonder as a child at all those classic Hollywood movies. She dreamed big and started her journey learning all about how to bring those things you see on screen to life. She went from her home in Texas to film school in Hollywood to learn all about creative production. Now, Dani's built an incredible reputation since for turning her clients' visions into reality. And she's a great example of inventing a business model to suit how you want to work in an industry that had a really fixed way of doing things. As an entrepreneur, as a person, you'll find that she's very inspiring and refreshingly honest. And in this episode, Dani discusses her experience with burnout, how she found her niche and reinvented herself. But let's go back to that young Dani who was watching spellbound those stars on the screen.
As a kid, I really loved theater and plays and productions and movies. And I got really into old films in particular, like old time Rat Pack, Frank Sinatra, like just old school Hollywood and Lucille Ball and just that particular world. And I, didn't really know what jobs were. My parents, have very blue collar jobs, and everyone I knew was very blue collar. There wasn't a lot of, out there opportunities that I had experience with. So I realized I wanted to get into film, and I just wanted to be involved in film. I didn't know how. So I, started going to film school here in Texas, and it just was like a part of the university program. And I still really wasn't getting anything, learning anything. And I thought to myself, like, if film is all in LA, like that's where I need to go. So I found a small little film school in Los Angeles that basically it's all the teachers are all working all day in the, in the industry. So you work in the industry all day and then you go to class from 7 to 11 at night, but you're being like, it's really small groups, it's hands-on. It was at the time a part of the Columbia program. So I went out to Columbia College, Hollywood, just north of Hollywood in Los Angeles, and just really like threw myself into it. I didn't know much. I mean, it was really great to learn about all the different roles, but it was really me and like 20 dudes that all wanted to be Scorsese or Tarantino or Spielberg, right? And I knew I wasn't any of those, but I didn't know what my like place was. And then I was lucky enough to get an opportunity working at a post house that did color grading. So we basically, this was at the time we still filmed commercials on film. And so it was transcoding that to digital tape and color grading. But I didn't really have I didn't know about the advertising industry in general. When it came to production, it never occurred to me. And then through that and just what I was kind of learning at school and realizing that all these people, all these guys that wanted to be, the next big Tarantino, they didn't want to do paperwork. They didn't want to do they didn't want to get permits or plan things. So I quickly learned what the role of a producer was, really bringing all of the elements together. And that had never occurred to me before.
So you felt like there was something a little bit different in a kind of college. This was Columbia College we're talking about in Hollywood. That in this world of sort of wildly creative people, did you feel like sort of slightly the odd one out, or were there others like you, who actually had this thing about
the odd one out because I felt like, not that I wasn't creative. I had always been very creative, but I didn't have a creative skill in the way that they did, because especially at the time, it was a lot different than now. So even like editing was very highly technical at the time, and working the cameras was very highly technical, and directing was technical. And I knew I really wasn't, I enjoyed writing, but it wasn't, really what sparked me. And as soon as I started, learning more about producing and the production side of the industry and seeing old school like production boards where you're breaking down every scene and then planning out how you're going to do everything, I just started offering to, I'll produce everyone's projects. So everybody had these projects they had to do for classes, but no one wanted to do any of the planning or prep work. And I just did it all. So I didn't have to do any of my own projects. I just produced everybody else's.
So you
And
must have been the most you must have been the most popular kid in the class then. I mean, if you were
well, that in combination with the job that I had access to transferring film to digital tape for free, which was very expensive at the time. And then I had access to old film that like no one wanted and we could like reuse, and old tapes that could be reused. So that job and like volunteering to do all the work that nobody wanted sort of was like perfect. And I also sort of started to see the creativity in it, because I think it was hard, especially when I first was at film school in general, because I'm not in it for the art, right? Like I'm not going to sit and watch a 4-hour Fellini film and just like, because I love the art of it. It is artistic and amazing, just how things get done. But like, I'm more of the entertainment. To me, what makes the industry great is entertaining people, and how can we make this entertaining, and how can we like bring people in. And that, in combination with learning a little bit more about producing and then the advertising world from that first job, I was hooked. I was like, advertising is where it's at. Commercials, instead of being on one film projects for like years at a time, you're just like constantly doing new things and really being able to do bolder, bigger things in the commercial advertising world.
now that means that suddenly you were a very busy person, so doing all
Mhm.
of these things, and there you are, you're off. You've sort of realized that's where you wanted to be, and you were clearly busy. But were you feeling a little bit entrepreneurial at that time? Did you feel like an entrepreneur, or did
No,
that a bit later? Or...
yeah, that definitely came later. I spent the bulk of my 20s and even the bulk of my 30s like learning everything I could about every part of the industry. So, I was working in advertising and post, and then I was like, I'll try a little bit of long form film development. And I tried that for a bit just to like make sure that wasn't for me. And then I just really took any job I could in post, in VFX, as PAs on set, like learning everything I could about the industry from every angle, because you don't really know what you enjoy and what sparks you until you've tried everything. And I think that's also now later in life given me the opportunity to have better experience with like getting all of those groups to talk to each other. And then I got really lucky in my early 30s at 30 to get an opportunity. I been working in LA for years, and then I got an opportunity to move to New York to really go on the other side of it. So work with a really a creative and a production company, and then also I was working a ton in advertising houses at agencies, which I hadn't done before. I had really been more on the execution side. So now I was more of on the creative execution side, which is different, and more of like, what does the client want and how are we making it happen. And that's what hooked me, I think, on just when anything is possible, right? Like having creatives just pitch these big ideas to you. And honestly, I never thought about starting my own company. It wasn't until I got burnt out working at all these agencies that were just sort of stuck in these old models. I just left saying, I know I don't want to start a production company because I don't want to be stuck doing like the same type of work all the time. And I don't just want to be freelance. So I saw this opportunity to sort of start a new in between. And this was long before people were saying the term fractional, which is now very like
Very
people are
common.
aware.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very common and it's, the hip terminology. But I think because fractional is what we are, what I am basically, but it's more than freelance. I think I saw this opportunity and I said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to start this and I'm going to see what it becomes. And I definitely started my company with much clearer picture of what I didn't want to do than what the company was going to now become.
Okay, so let's, for the benefit of our listeners who
Mhm.
don't work in your industry and so on, just tell us about this old agency model. What was exactly wrong with it? Why didn't it work for you?
So the classic agency model is having, creatives that they'll pitch an idea, you'll have an agency producer hire those, hire people, but or also trying to keep as much of it in-house. It's like, well, we have resources in-house, so we should pitch only the ideas that these resources can do. And from like a money standpoint, it's basically your spending's the same, if not more, but it's in-house P&L versus like getting the best out of house people. I also think that, as the industry has changed, these agency teams have gotten so overwhelmed and lean, they don't have the time to constantly go out and find innovative, new, creative ways of doing things, or innovative new creators that are directors and photographers. So I was really like constantly pushing that where I was. And I just kind of was getting too much pushback of, well, why can't we do this? We should have people in house that do this. And I'm a firm believer that the people that you have in house are not always, most of the time, not the best people to do your work for you. Like there's certain work that they are great at, but there's work that you're not going to get, above and beyond effort and big ideas from the people that maybe are too afraid to like raise their hand in house.
And so that's what's wrong with the model. And then the improvements, in terms of your nirvana, which you've now been able to start to create, if you like. I mean,
Mhm.
the essential differences are what? Just the precise opposite of that? Or were there good
It's
things that you took
basically
from the
what
old
I
agency?
basically saw was as I was reaching peak burnout, I was still getting a lot of calls and emails from people I had worked with previously or, just my network. And I had kind of become known as a fixer. If you need something and you need it fast and you need it right and you need to know that like whatever it is going to get handled, you call Dani. And I started to realize that the information in my head was worth far more than anyone was going to ever be able to pay me to do that for them if, in that particular way. And I wanted to be able to create a space for agencies and brands to tap into that and to tap into teams that they need in the way that they need them easier. So, we work at the same time, we were seeing small agencies sort of pop up that are really just a couple creatives and maybe don't have an operations person or a producers. And, they can tag me and our team and whatever the huge idea is, whether it's a video or, an event in Times Square, like we do it. We have ways to do it. We have connections and we get it done for them seamlessly and without all the overhead of them like having to have full-time staff for that.
You've mentioned burnout a couple of times, and
Mhm,
and please don't say anything if you don't want to say anything. But
mhm,
but did the burnout, so came then as a direct result of like either working too hard or working in this old
mhm.
model, and how, and in a way, although nobody wants to go through burnout, was it something that looking back on it sort of helped in the sense of realizing what you did want from work?
Yeah. I mean, you don't learn all it's kind of like a young kid, right? It's like kids throw themselves in all the directions to try to figure out like their space. And a lot of that is what burnout or struggle or stress is telling you is that like that isn't good. And you're learning information about how this system works or how that process is and what to do and not do. And I think I was reaching max capacity, but it was really just more of a feeling that I was being asked to like make change and innovate and like the department and do things. But in reality, that wasn't what they wanted, right? They wanted to be status quo. They wouldn't, I think you can only raise your hand so many times and not be heard or feel struggle and feel like you're giving so much more than everyone else is because there's an easier, better way to do things. And you feel crazy, like no one sees what you see. And then you kind of realize you're not crazy, they're crazy, and you got to get out of there and like I think start your own thing. And because of how quickly it is harder, I think it because there's not a lot of companies like mine. There's very few. And I'm not a production company. I'm not an ad agency. I'm not a creative agency, but I work with all of them and I do all of these parts as a like, auxiliary plug and play system they can use. Because of that, there's a lot of, I don't have an easy elevator pitch. So I think I've spent a lot of the last 10 years just figuring it out. And at first, like I said, I didn't know what I wanted it to be, but I knew what I didn't want it to be. And then as it grew, and I learned more about what my clients needed and wanted and what worked and what didn't. Now we have this model that's been really, successful for us.
And elevator pitches don't always work because people more like to remember how you made them feel necessarily, and then necessarily they probably forget what the words
Yeah.
were
Typically,
anyway. So
people will say, I had no idea what you guys did exactly. And then they'll get on the phone with me and go, this is exactly what I need. Because we also can't be like put in a box because we don't just do one thing.
yeah, exactly. So let's move forward then. So I think it was 2017
Mhm.
you founded the auxiliary. Now, in many industries, but particularly I would suggest in your industry, that's quite a brave thing to do because there is the industry, and it's a big kind of almost like a mafia sort of going on, of loads of people, and there's certain ways that your industry sort of does things and so on. I mean, did you just go, oh God, I've just got to do this. I can't stand it anymore. And I'm, if I don't do it, I'll always regret it. I mean, did you have doubts at that moment of foundation of the company? I just want to know what your mindset was like
No, I
at the
think it
moment
was
you
more
started it. Yeah.
the moment because I think I realized I had moved to a bunch of different agencies, I had done different things, and I just realized that like a position change or a job change wasn't going to change the bigger problem, and that I needed to create a space that helped me do what I loved doing. And I like to say to all people in that situation, in all honesty, the first leap is not the scariest. It's like starting a company is not necessarily the scariest part. Because I think at the first you have nothing to lose. Like, what's the worst that could happen? You try it for 6 months or a year and it doesn't work, or you learn something else, whatever, right? That first big step seems like it would be the scariest, but it's not. It's actually 6, 7, 10 years down the road when you've built a company and you then have different visions for it and you're trying to move that boulder. That becomes harder than I think like just starting. I mean, because at that point, what's the worst thing that could happen? You go back to your regular job, right? You already have all the skill sets to do what you want, and it either works or it doesn't. You don't like no entrepreneur, no, Forbes billionaire has ever gotten anywhere by not failing. They have a huge like row of failures behind them.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about that initial kind
Mhm.
of cultural view when you sort of set it up. On your website currently, you've got not another proud company. They only make what they want. We make everything else. We're not them. We're you. Unleashed. We embed, we scale, we deliver like hell. No fluff, just firepower. I love it, by the way. I mean, is that what you had started out with? Is that what you have now, or has it changed along the way?
It has changed a lot because, especially like I said, at first, no one was using fractional. And I wanted to try to denote us as not being a production company, because production companies, they have a roster of directors, they do a certain kind of style, they do one thing, they either make commercials or they do this. We facilitate every kind of creative project, from like full repackaging of your brand to like full scale events, or I've made video games for brand, like whatever it is. And I had a lot, I think at first, because of that fear a little bit, that you try to cast a wide net, because I was still figuring out what the model was and what we were going to be. And I got a lot of confusing people, like not really quite knowing what we did, which was fine. But I think I was too scared to define it, because I didn't want to lose business. I wanted people to, kind of think whatever they were going to think. And it actually did not do as well. Now that I figured out the model more, I've been able to define the messaging.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting thing that a lot of entrepreneurs face early on is that they will say, "I'll do anything" at the start, and actually, it's only when they've been doing it for a little while they realize that maybe there are some things that they shouldn't do.
Yeah.
Are you sort of, was there a moment of realization, maybe when you kind of got a project that maybe your heart wasn't quite in it, or something like that, where you thought, "I wish I hadn't taken this on"?
Oh, yeah, a ton. But it's easier to have that feeling when it's your company and you're getting paid than when you're taking that same project and you're in-house for somebody. But
Yeah.
the first like 3 years, or even just like 1 or 2 years, like I really did. I had a very rudimentary site. I was not trying to push people I wasn't trying to build the brand. I was just taking any work I could get to figure out what the company was. But because of that, I wasn't like really pushing any kind of communication or marketing pieces very hard, because I wanted to figure it out. And then I figured it out a little bit more and did sort of a mini rebrand in 2019. And it was still kind of broad, right? It was just more of a cleaned up version. And it really wasn't until last year, now that I've figured out the model that works and I know the messaging and I've tested it across the board, that I did a full website redo. And we hadn't had a reel before that, because even as our reel says, it's not our work. It's it's our clients. It's your work that you're seeing there. And that messaging, it's really like been just working in my head for years and years. And I'm still like, oh, tweak it, like you want to like change it. But I think you learn more about your brand and you learn more about what resonates with, your clients. And you also, there was a few years where I didn't really want to work with brands directly. I only wanted to work through agencies. And now I'm sort of pivoting to being able to work with either, because there's great partnerships both with clients and with agencies.
And I wanted to ask you about that actually, because because you've got an impressive list of brands that you do work with, and also an agency side to your business. Could you just maybe explain the difference there? Because I mean, maybe some people won't quite understand that.
So, a creative ad agency, creative marketing agency, now, you have the big, large agencies that have all started to merge together because they're getting too heavy to support themselves. And then you have this emergence of small agencies that are 2 to 10, maybe 50 people, and they are really creative led and creative driven, but they don't have all the overhead and they really can't keep all the overhead of a larger agency. So they're really scaling up and down based on the clients and the projects they have coming in. And production is a space where it's particularly hard to do that because they feel like they have to wait until they've fully sold the idea and crafted it, have the money, and then go find someone to go make it. But then they've lost this whole opportunity of having embedded producers helping them craft the idea, helping them move it and improve it. And how else could we do this that isn't, just that way? Or can we even afford this? Or is this vendor even the right vendor for that? All of that. And I think what we do is allow agencies to tap into whatever resources they need earlier and faster, and they're only paying for what they're needing and using. So it's also much more cost effective. And most of the time, the bulk of our fees come out of the hard cost of the creative project. So it's almost no overhead for them.
On your website, there's other people on that website, so you're more we than me now. So, I mean, tell us about them and the role that they play. Are they associates? Are they employees? How does it work?
I have producers that they are producers that work for me. I have, because at this point, when we work with agencies, especially our retainer clients, we embed producers in-house with them. And that basically lets them steep into their culture, learn more about how they work, learn more about what creatives each kind of want so that they can handle, they can make decisions for those teams without having to ask them every single small thing. They can get their vision a lot faster. And so some of those people those are my most longest, employees. I have other, producers that work for me that I slate in, because every time we have a client, I bring on a producer that's very specific to the client and the projects and, the skill set. So it's, it allows me to have really an open-ended, team. And also I really am involved at the beginning of projects with sort of kicking off producers and teams, making sure we're bringing in the right partners and vendors. But then I'm able to step back and continue, with my other clients and business while the producers are handling the day-to-day.
Okay, so let's move forward then to the pandemic. Were you affected by the pandemic? How
Mhm.
did it? So, I mean, I would imagine you were, because most of most of
I
most
hired
of
my
the
first, yeah, I hired my first employee a month before the pandemic. We were also in New York at the time. I got pregnant day one of the COVID lockdown, which was that was a big effect. Um, but it was actually in the end, it ended up being very impactful because agencies and brands were a lot more used to remote teams and not needing to pay people to sit there and do nothing or waste their time. And that has helped this fractional workforce and this more creative nomad workforce flourish in the last few years. It was a little rocky at first, but also I think the fun part was figuring out how to do things remote. I was producing a ton of virtual productions and remote. That became the fun part, figuring out how you're going to solve the problem.
I mean, the pandemic wasn't fun, of course, for obvious reasons, but it was fun in that sense because
Mhm.
because it certainly in my business, and my
Mhm.
business is all around sort of content strategy, thought leadership, and so on. And I just found I was reaching into all parts of the world that I had even considered before. So it was actually a real positive benefit for your in a strict business
But
sense, at least.
also, as these agencies had to lay off a ton of people, a lot of those, creative teams that realized that they could go start their own thing, and they've started their own. So now, in the last, 5 years since then, you've had even more of these small, really independent creative agencies pop up. And these are people who they can pitch anything. So they don't have to leave business on the table. They're not gonna just pitch you a video or just pitch you a photo or whatever website. They just pitch a big idea, and then I can help them execute every single part of it so they can just tap, a little bit deeper into their creative mind.
Okay. Again, we'll move forward a little bit. You won an Emmy 2023. So, My Mark, it's a short film or program about a chef. I mean, just tell us a little bit about that.
So that was actually my second project working with Chef Samuelson, Marcus Samuelson. I did a series with Uber Eats with him, like right towards the end of the pandemic, but did really well. And he was so amazing to work with. And so we partnered with him again and our clients at Monogram to produce a branded series where we were renovating his home outside of Sag Harbor and renovating it with Monogram appliances, which took a very, very long time, especially on an island and during the pandemic. And it took us about a year to renovate the place, but we shot at the beginning and the whole renovation was included. And then we did a few more days of filming after the renovation. And it was a 3-episode series that was picked up on Bon Appetit networks. And yeah, I was surprised. I actually didn't know I had won until someone called me to tell me they had accepted it for me.
Right. So I mean, I think most people, people who aren't in the industry will have heard of an Emmy. They probably won't quite sure where it fits into the pantheon of awards. Like versus Oscars and things like that. But they know it's a good thing, and so on. Has it made a difference in terms of the profile of the business and yourself and so on? Has it given you an uplift?
I think so. I think at first, what's difficult when you have a business that works in the fractional space is I think that there was a lot of fear I had of promoting myself and promoting the brand because, I like that Emmy I won with a client. I won it for a client. But the difference with an Emmy is a lot of other awards go to the company or the agency or the brand. Emmys go to the actual people whose names are in the credits. It goes to the people. So that was really helpful. Like, if anything, it just gave me a boost of confidence, but it's been really helpful even just to be able to include that. And then since feeling more confident in being able to push and promote the business, because, I think just someone was asking me, well, why don't your clients why aren't they yelling from the rooftops and praise, singing your praises to other agencies? It's because why would they want to give the secret to their sauce to their competitors? So it's a very fine line. And it's a lot of times, whether we're working at a brand or working in-house at an agency, we're white labeling. So we'll have, emails and as far as outside facing, it looked like we're fully embedded there. So it's a kind of, you get to get the best of both worlds where you're embedding, but you also have I have the empowerment to feel like a consultant where I can give the brutal, honest truth, whereas your in-house team won't.
Yeah. I mean, I sometimes find that, so I'm a writer, and I find sometimes the hardest story to tell is my own. So and I don't know whether you're in this thing where you're helping to tell other people's stories. I'm just reading between the lines here slightly. You can tell me I'm wrong, but is that an issue for you? Like sometimes you're a bit reticent
I
about
have been that's really, especially this year as the company is reaching almost 10 years, I'm trying to make this pivot from being in the work to running the company and growing the company and in different ways, and sort of also leading the charge on other directions I want the industry to go, where previously I had been afraid to be in front of the camera. I'm behind the camera. I'm, the running joke is, if you've not heard of me, it's because I've been spending the last decade making everyone else look good. But I'm now trying to get out there and tell my story more. I even would highly recommend to anyone listening to this podcast. For an article I was writing, I did this exercise where I really wrote out my entire career path, very long, not in something I would give, not an article I would give anyone, but more as the exercise of getting very detailed with who I was working with and what I was learning. And it was a huge eye opener for me, to go back and think of even bosses that I at the time didn't understand, that I understand so much more. And I respect oh, they were a genius and I just didn't even see it. And I think it's a good place to write all that out so that you can really define and see where you've been. But then also it's going to kind of help you realize oh, yeah, I did all that too. And help propel you forward with some more confidence.
Okay. So this is a question, is that, we all have things that in our entrepreneurial careers that, if we're honest, we're either not very good at or we just don't like doing, even if we are good at them. Do you, what aspect of your current business life, you might have a long list for all I know.
The list has gotten longer, but I think there's a reason. Like, I remember being a very young, starting out in my career and working for these head CEO, huge high level people, and being like, oh my God, they can't make their own phone calls, or they can't, like, just thinking it was ridiculous. And I get it now. Like, CEO brain is a real thing. And now I have two young kids. I have even less brain space. Like, you have to really delegate every single thing that does not like help you do what you want to do and what like wakes you up every morning. So, I am not admin is like my least favorite thing to do in the world. So I have, admin help and operations help. I've been programming a lot of AI bots to just really be my like email assistant or scheduler assistant, or, my just helping manage my tasks, and any single thing that can be done in that task that I don't have to take time to do, somebody else can do for me, or a bot can do, or AI can do. And I've been trying more and more. It's hard, but to unload as much of that as possible so that I can focus on the parts of my business that I need to, because, that's what helps to grow it. And that's also like what, I also want to make sure that I always have time to focus on the creative development of the projects with my clients, because that's what I'm known for the most, is finding the perfect people and the perfect teams to execute a project, and not letting, if you hire a particular vendor or company, the first thing they're going to do to save time or cut cost is tweak the creative, or like, and not hold it true. Whereas like when you're embedded in the agency and they're your client, that's what you're not changing. And you're making sure that that's like held high. So I try to take everything else off my plate to make more time for that.
Okay, so you've alluded to the fact that you're in a period of sort of growth now and so on. So give me one or two things in the kind of what's next category of what's going to happen to auxiliary. I mean, these may be commercial secrets that you can't tell me live on air, but I mean, but are there certain directions in which you're heading that you can tell me about?
I will say it's been really hard to be as slow as my business has been this year, because I had a completely different plan for it at the end of last year. And then just through like a frame of different things, I realized the only way that I could grow and go get the kinds of clients that I needed and keep the model going was to step back from clients and step back from things that weren't fitting for that. So it's kind of been like a shedding, of some old stuff that wasn't doing the company, justice and wasn't moving it forward. And in that, I've been able to have the brain space to think about what's next and to plan for what's next. And a lot of that is this thought leadership stuff that I'm doing, these podcasts, really working more with brands. Like I mentioned earlier, I want to get in and be involved with brands more. I think that there's a huge change that's happening where, social engagement is down. People are tired of being oversold in every single digital medium. And there's this opportunity for brands to start building more community and meeting them where they are and doing things in like real life, or even just like telling better stories at better quality, right? And trying to be the voice of that and work with brands and agencies to help that come along too.
Okay, brilliant. My final question is, so, our show's all about giving listeners the confidence to succeed. Maybe they're just about to start up, or maybe even thinking about starting up, or they've been doing it for a few months. They're not quite sure whether it's what they wanted to do or not. I mean, what advice would you give to those budding entrepreneurs right at the start? If you go back to the start of your entrepreneurial journey, I mean, what kind of hope and confidence can you sort of give them about lessons you've learned along the way?
Well, one, I would say if there's an idea that has just been nagging you, whatever it is that there's something there, or it's as simple as like you want to build something because you need that tool and no one else has it. If there's just this thing that's there and nagging at you, there's a reason for that. There's a reason that idea is there. And it's also okay to not talk to anybody about it and to just work it out with yourself. Don't let anybody rain on your parade before you've even started. And just start doing it. I think it was about 6 months before I left my full-time job that I just started. I didn't know, Project Q is what I started it. And I started a Word document online, and was just pumping ideas and what could it be and how would it work. And, while I was saving money, and I think like there's a reason for that. And anytime you're doing the thing that like is your purpose and gives you drive and excitement, it's going to work out one way or another. It just may not, it's not always going to be the path that you expect, but I would say like take the ongoing like poking in the back of your brain with this idea as the sign from the universe that you need to do that.
Yes, those things that nag away at you. I just love the idea of Dani talking about this thing nagging away at you just to go and do it when you feel that. Dani had that itch and she had to scratch it. So go and scratch that itch if you've got one in your life. I also think that Dani, in an industry full of egos, has stood out by making it her business to be really busy making others look great. She's won awards, but hasn't really chased the spotlight, and she's developed her own way of working in an industry where before there was only one model and one way of doing things. She's managed to create a fractional creative business that actually works. So if you have ever felt stuck in a traditional model, and so many of you have already told me that you do, or dreamed of breaking one, then this episode is dedicated just for you. So thank you to Dani, and thank you to our growing band of listeners and the great feedback we're getting on the show. I mean, if you enjoyed this episode, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate and review through your usual podcast provider. And if you want to find out more about the Merri-Cast, look for me, Trevor Meriden, or our business Merriborn on merriborn.co.uk. And until then, thanks for listening.